Hi there. While you were away during summer break, there was a murder. Yes, the crime scene's been blocked off. Everything is set for you to solve the crime. Where? The murder occurred in the Olga Oatmeal factory. Oatmeal, cookies, lots of stuff there, powder, white powder, mysterious things that went on that we found at the crime scene. Lots of evidence. What we're going to be doing is looking at something about chemistry. Yes, believe it or not, we need chemistry in biology. The reason is every living organism is made up of different chemicals. We're also going to be using your scientific skills to solve this. We're going to be analyzing the particular evidence, things that we found. You will have read the alibis of those who are accused, and then you're going to perform these tests in class to figure out and decide who killed Chester. Some of the things that we're going to look at. At the crime scene, we found these particular ingredients. We found washing powder. We found sugar. We found flour. Of course, it's an oatmeal factory, and they like to make oatmeal cookies. Salt and baking soda. The one thing we also are going to use is a chemical called iodine. If you're curious, you're going to figure out what in the world iodine does with each of these powders. These powders here, all of them, they have a particular color. They're all pretty much on the level of being white. Fine powders, granular powders. How will each of these powders react with this particular chemical called iodine? Okay, but one of the things we know is regardless, we always are going to use our safety goggles prior to using iodine. Safety's first in the lab, okay? No safety goggles, bad on you. One of the things we're also going to do is with these powders, we're going to use a solution. We're going to use a graduated cylinder, 10 mils, and we're going to make a solution of each of these powders. What you might remember from different classes from past is that there's a particular pH scale. pH scale will allow us to determine if something is going to be basic, meaning that if it is basic, it's going to have a pH of 7 or above. How will we know that? We are going to use pH paper, and we're going to compare the pH of the solution with the different colors here to determine what exactly the pH is. If it's less than 7, we are going to consider that to be an acid. Okay? Essentially, if what we know is the fact that acids and bases are all chemicals which are going to have these particular ions. They're going to have either a hydrogen proton, which we're going to look at the hydrogen proton, which makes it acidic, and they're also going to have a hydroxyl, sometimes called hydronium. The relationship between these two protons will determine if something is acidic or basic. Here on the base scale, if there's less hydrogen ion in comparison to the hydroxyl ion, meaning more of these in the solution, it's going to be basic. Not necessarily safe, but just a different characteristic of pH. On the other side, if, for example, we are going to measure the pH and we get a pH of anything below 7, that means there's more of these hydrogen ions in comparison to the hydroxyl or hydronium ions. That's just an overview of pH. We're going to get a little bit more to that in Chapter 3, I believe, which is chemistry. We're also going to see how these particular chemicals react with something called vinegar. All of you know about vinegar. Vinegar, if we look at vinegar as a pH of approximately 2, okay, it's considered to be a weak acid. It's not a strong acid, it's a weak acid. Okay, it has something to do with not how low the number is, but the chemicals which make it up. And later on we're going to find that it's actually an organic acid. We're going to see what happens with these particular powders. And what we're going to do is you're going to use a beaker. And this is your famous beaker. It's 100 ml. Wash it out really well after each time. Don't forget, you also have your goggles on. And so we're going to use a beaker. We're going to add a little bit of the powder. Maybe we're going to just add maybe let's say, I don't know, baking soda. So we're going to add some of the baking soda down there, and that didn't work. So we're going to add some of the baking soda. And so we're going to add some of the baking soda, and we're going to add 10 mils, I think, we're going to read our procedure, of the vinegar. Or how does it react? Does it bubble? Does it fizz? Does it smell? Does it erupt? We don't know. We're going to compare how this powder, washing powder, baking soda, etc., we're going to compare those with what we call the mystery powder. And if you look at the mystery powder, that didn't work, powder, that's what was found at the crime scene. It's up to you to look at the analysis and compare the two. Ooh. Other thing we're going to do is we found out there are some writing utensils. There were pens there at the crime scene. We're going to do a very simple test. Again, you're going to use a beaker. And this time you're going to cut some strips of coffee filter. You're going to mark, as it's shown here, you're going to mark there all these different tips. Just a little bit of ink sample right there. And then you're going to let it just barely touch, and by this process called capillary action, these pens are going to give a trademark color. Some are going to perhaps spread in all these different colors. Some are going to give funky little designs. But the thing is, you're going to compare again with, yes, compare with what? Our mystery note that was found at the crime scene. There will be enough of the mystery note that each of you can take a little bit, scribble, 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 and you're going to compare the samples with the pen and see if you can figure out which of these pens, pen A, pen B, or pen C, matches the note with the actual suspect. Okay, so far so good. And yes, of course, you got your goggles. We're also going to do a fabric test. Definitely your goggles. I don't want you to, blow the school up or anything like that. Very basic. There were a few pieces of fabric found. And the fabric is going to be placed just above the flame, not into the flame, not way so far that the flame can't even react with it. And you're going to test each fabric. You're going to hold each little piece of fabric with wonderful things, fascinating things called tweezers. Okay, you all know what these are. Tweezers, etc. We're going to take the tweezers. You're going to hold it with your fingers really gently. Put it over this flame. And with the flame here, you're going to see what happens to each of the fabric. We have cotton, acrylic, and something else that you need to find out. And we're going to determine, does this fabric melt? Does this fabric burn? In other words, flame. A melt, you're not going to see melt, it just kind of oozes. Does it have a particular odor? All of these, yes, are going to be compared with the fabric found at the scene where Chester lay dead in the Olga oatmeal factory. So one of the things that you need to do is you need to make sure you read about the murder. Okay? You need to figure out who are the suspects. How does the evidence relate to each suspect? There are 7 questions that you can go ahead and download onto your iPad. Put those onto your iPad. You put in a PDF as believed they're already there. These 7 questions are the preliminary questions. These can be found on Blackboard under a file, chemistry, and ultimately Chester's murder. Your job to do that. That's your homework. Have fun. Maybe you'll have some pretty good clues as to who killed Chester. All right, that's it for now.